Now joined by Rahul Bajoria, regional economist at Barclays Capital. Rahul, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So is the Indian economy overheating? Do we need to see the central bank raising rates more and perhaps the government taking more measures to cool down the economy?
Well, in our opinion, I think Indian economy did have a big risk of overheating basically in the first half of the year when inflation was becoming more rampant in nature and we were seeing growth numbers rising in line with it. Going forward, we expect inflationary pressures to come down slightly due to better food supply outlook, and also the impact of the interest rate hikes is likely to start appearing, which will possibly reduce the risk of overheating in coming months.
Now, we're talking about the Indian economy overheating. The other economy that we often talk about overheating is the Chinese economy. But there's a big difference, isn't there, between Chinese and Indian growth, and that exports actually account for less than 1/5 of India's GDP. So what is driving India's growth?
Well, India's growth is predominantly based on domestic demand. I mean, what we have seen in the last few months is that investment demand has essentially skyrocketed, which is putting pressure on the imports. I mean, if we look at the import numbers coming out of India, we have seen the demand for commodities essentially going up quite significantly. I think this trend of growth being supported by underlying domestic momentum is very much going to be the key driver for growth going forward from here.
Now, I wonder if this domestic demand in India that's powering its growth shelters it from the rest of the global economy, because we're going to see a slowdown there. We're already seeing a slowdown there in the global economy. Is India immune to that?
I think it's not completely immune to a global slowdown, because financial markets and asset valuations are very much linked to the global economy. However, as you said earlier, the robust domestic demand, essentially the man on the street in India, may not be hampered so much because the linkages on the trade side is pretty weak.
So tell us about the agricultural industry. 3/5 of India's population are dependent on agriculture. You've had a good monsoon. We've also seen global food commodity prices spike. How's that impacting Indian people?
I think the consumption of durables, when we look at the numbers, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the demand for things like cars, the demand for mobile phones, essentially luxury items for the common Indian man, has skyrocketed quite a bit. And I think as farm incomes remain robust, possibly from a good monsoon production, I think this demand is very much going to remain embedded within the system. So hiking interest rates earlier rather than later would make more sense.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Rahul Bajoria from Barclays Capital, thank you very much for joining us.